The self-excitement of the infinite mind is always too great to hang on to anything for too long, and thus it loses the chance to explore the full potential of its own imagination. In order to admire its own ingenuity, the infinite mind has to project a strong thrust of will to make a pattern stable. Once crystallized, the speed of energy flowing through that pattern is slowed down, and therefore it can be experienced as it stands separated from the infinite speed of the energy flow of imagination. The manifestation of individual souls happen from a desire to further explore this concept of separation. The infinite mind, on the verge of creativity, has discovered how to use powerful thought impulses to project its attention into bundles of light, which appeared as independent while still being part of the whole. The newly formed entities had the same desire to explore the gift of life and began crystallizing their own unique patterns of experience. This turned out to be an amazing phenomenon, since the infinite mind could finally learn about its potential. An explosion of creation then followed. Different forms of life appeared in various fields of consciousness to serve as the receptacles of the infinite mind. The universe of light I felt I belonged to was the original mental construct which represented a white three-dimensional canvas for all the things manifested. Every thought pattern the infinite mind would come up with could be crystallized and introduced into a type of being to be experienced. Eons have passed, and the infinite mind started seeing itself as an eternal force of creation, or as an eternal creator, yet it encountered a new dilemma. The beings manifested found it difficult to maintain awareness of themselves as separate entities. They behaved like children and depended on instructions instead of having their own will. Just like initially the eternal creator had to wake up to its own power of creation latent in the infinite mind, these new forms were asleep and needed to wake up to the inherent property of their existence, which was that they themselves were also creators. In order to jolt the individual souls into achieving a primitive form of self-awareness, the creator increased the level of separation between itself and the children by projecting a predefined thought barrier. The beings were then left on their own and had to crystallize in their awareness a specific pattern resonant to a given energetic key of the creator, at which point the barrier would be released and the souls would experience the joy of reunification. This unique experiment in consciousness led to the establishment of many environments where souls could go through their systems of training to integrate complex geometrical patterns. Every geometrical structure offered an original route of energy flow, giving the soul an inimitable feeling of joy, which would naturally be shared with the creator. More eons have passed in the universe of light, as the infinite mind kept playing a game of ambition with itself and grew in many orders of scale. The next evolutionary leap was made when a few beings raised their consciousness to a level where they did not require an outside influence to better themselves. They were the first ones to reach the perfect balance between their individual self and the inherent awareness that they represented the manifestation of the infinite mind. In a way, these pioneers could be considered the first truly conscious entities because they've accumulated the willpower to generate enough patterns of living light around them to eternally maintain their crystallizations, simply by their own volitions. As a result, the bodies they existed in were self-designed to accomplish a very harmonic structure of energy flow, which efficiently combined an incredible amount of frequencies. I visualized them as super beings with tall bodies of light, radiating rainbows of colours. These were in fact the original architects, who took over the mission of the infinite mind to set up different environments for evolution and watch over other, younger souls in creation. The architects were only a few, and their accelerated evolution took almost all the concentration of the infinite mind, leaving other parts of creation underdeveloped. Moulding conscious beings that can generate light proved to be a long and tedious process, hard to duplicate, yet the phenomenon was incredibly exciting and the trade-off was well worth it, since it had amazing, unpredictable results. The Creator loved all its creation and wanted every soul to experience the joy of self-awareness, but found itself again at an impasse. In order for greater numbers of beings to go through similar process of awakening, more variables had to be taken into consideration, and a new concept for evolution was needed. Instead of allowing beings to gradually increase their levels of crystallizations, the chosen approach was to copy the complex patterns of the architects and design the blueprint of a new body which had similar characteristics to what we now know to be a human form. All of a sudden, younger souls were put into dense bodies and left to their own to learn how to generate light patterns, with the hope that they would maintain their crystallizations and function just like the architects. A primordial race of humanoid angelic beings was then developed to live in the universe of light. The Creator lovingly sent them all kinds of incentive to evolve, but they found it very difficult to project energy through bodies of such high complexity. They didn't have enough willpower to sustain their crystallizations, and once the outside help stopped, their existence became more like a frozen memory in the infinite mind than actual active beings. Reflecting on this failed attempt, the creator had a new idea to decompose the original blueprint of the angelic beings into separate frequencies and design a specific school-like environment with energetic thresholds called a universe, where the same soul could learn how to integrate the individual components one at a time. Then when the soul figured out its own unique method to control all of the necessary frequencies separately, it was given the choice to reunify the entire angelic blueprint into a self-sustaining body of light. Surprisingly, this process worked correctly, and the creator achieved the manifestation of a new group of angelic beings with enough experience to generate eternal patterns and be themselves creators. Many universes were established within the universe of light as evolutionary clockwork mechanisms for beings to acquire very complex crystallizations. Once entered in a universe, a soul would spin for eons through various cycles of evolution until it learned how to achieve control over the templates given by the creator. As more and more angelic beings sprang into existence, the focus of the infinite mind went into giving them the free will to create their own universes under the supervision of the architects. These creative beings found it extremely exciting to invent original templates of experience. With every new design, they've kept building denser and denser environments for consciousness training. The most precious property of a soul is its own unique way of perceiving creation through its individual crystallization. As the patterns of energy flow evolve, a soul feels higher and higher levels of excitement about its state of being. This ever-burning desire to push the boundaries of existence made the angelic beings reach the conclusion they needed to jump into the next type of experience, to break into their next order of scale. A soul had to integrate an extremely large number of patterns, and based on the old model of growth, it would have taken forever. The willpower necessary to achieve such a fast speed of crystallization seemed impossible compared to the rate of accumulation creation worked with at the time. Yet the angelic beings observed that when entities on different levels of complexity interacted, the younger souls would get extremely excited to see where the evolution could take them. This phenomenon of reflection proved to be a strong incentive for increasing willpower. If consciousness found a way to constantly motivate itself and not to fall asleep, the amount of energy it could draw from the infinite mind would be limitless. After long consideration, the angelic beings decided to combine and compress the patterns of everything previously created into a new multi-layered environment, a dense universe, which offered the perfect opportunity for more advanced beings to help the younger ones evolve faster. All energy influxes sent downwards within the levels of this enormous setting would now act as motivators of will for souls to maintain themselves awake and focused towards reaching their next higher level of being. It was calculated that the resultant push of consciousness happening upwards throughout this hierarchy would be strong enough to crystallize the complete blueprint of angelic beings in a fraction of the time it took before. Once all energetic boundaries of the dense universe have been set in place, a lot of excited souls went in open to have the most incredible experience yet. A group of architects also had to go inside and take on the responsibility of guiding the whole evolutionary process. But in order to achieve such a tremendous task, they too needed an incentive, so they chose to put themselves under a frequency lock and not return into the great universe of light until every younger soul from within the evolved into angelic being. The energetic mechanism of this dense universe started functioning quite admirably, and the complexity of the templates projected on the younger souls increased considerably. The new forms angelic beings had fresh perspective on existence and a strong will to create never before seen immense civilizations in the great universe of light. From an eternal standpoint, the entire creation was rejoicing in the glory of its own ingenuity, but then the unthinkable happened. The souls on the lower levels remained fascinated by this compressed experience of physicality and began to disregard the higher impulses, slowly forgetting that their goal was to actually become angelic beings. Only those who had the desire to evolve could still benefit from the help of the architects to better themselves. As a result, energy stopped flowing harmonically through the many levels of being, and the whole universe became unbalanced. These distortions in the localized environments made it difficult for the younger souls to accumulate crystallizations evenly in a given time period. Having asymmetrical energy patterns, they kept reflecting their own differences upon each other and started turning their attention away from conscious self-development. This new kind of energy sharing created a wide range of unknown emotional reactions and set the individual beings on alternate paths of evolution, which were nearly impossible to predict based on original templates. For the first time, the architects were forced to calculate outcomes in terms of probabilities. Moreover, as the younger souls ignored the warnings from their hierarchy, their perception narrowed down within the limited patterns of the local environment until they were unable to remember the truth of their existence. While initially the radiance of a soul was eternally maintained by the energy influxes sent from the infinite mind, now, since the lower beings did not want to receive the higher frequencies anymore, they found themselves cut off from the source, feeling separate. Instead of sharing energy vertically through levels of the hierarchy, the beings projected horizontally onto one another until they entered a never-before experienced state of isolation, which prompted a change in the direction of the energy flow, causing eclipses in consciousness and diminishing the radiance of light. This resistance against the natural force of evolution proved to be their demise. The souls were extremely excited to experience physicality, but they did not realise that by changing their focus upon the finite patterns, that they also gave away their ability to hold light in the body. As a consequence of this unaware decision, the confined environment they existed in turned darker, contrasting the setting of the universe of light. After a while, everyone who chose to detach themselves from higher eternal streams began feeling an incredible suffocation caused by the lack of energy, to satisfy their life force from the soul impulses of others. This behaviour represented a primitive frequency of hate which started to apply pressure on the decrystallizations of ones who could still draw energy from the upper levels of the dense universe. Sadly, the hate kept spreading, and the architects witnessed the consciousness field in the lower densities falling under an unprecedented tension sustained by these new thought patterns that opposed evolution. As a consequence, the younger beings were in danger of not completing their ascension cycles, since they had no awareness of how to fight against unknown darkness. The architects wanted to help from above, but their assistance was limited by the energetic barriers already set in place, so they had to go themselves into the darker environments and reflect the correct template of light onto the distorted beings and hope that they would realign. The imminent threat was that the accumulated tension in the consciousness field would start breaking the crystallizations of the souls affected by the dark thought patterns, slowly disintegrating their blueprints and erasing them from existence. Once inside, the architects did help a number of beings ascend correctly and exit into the unaffected levels of the dense universe, but the process turned out to be excruciating for everybody. The amount of light patterns the architect had to generate around itself to keep the younger souls awake and focused baffled imagination. Every negative thought pattern which arose against evolution had to be counter-interacted by a new one based on the correct template. This desperate measure increased again the tension in the environment, and things amplified in such a way that whoever could not respond positively to the light would have an opposite reaction, giving more energy to the negative frequencies. Right in the middle of these exceptional developments, the architects were shocked to observe how all of a sudden the negative patterns began adapting against targeted influxes of light, as if they had a mind of their own. In horror, the entire creation was forced to recognise that the very thought forms the darkness consisted of, and in fact acquire self-awareness, and intentionally kept feeding on the younger physical beings. They spread like a plague everywhere through the lower levels, and since their collective property was to absorb the energy of light, these newly manifested entities have been named the Shadows. Acting in antithesis to the natural impulse of expansion, the Shadows crystallise their consciousness field into a parallel dreamlike reality, giving birth to a new type of existence beyond the reaches of light. With time, the effective parts of the dense universe become split. On one side, the architects fought for the younger souls to evolve into angelic beings, while on the other, the Shadows fought to destroy the crystallizations of the weak, making them join the dark side. This division in consciousness allowed for a nightmare to unfold, as anybody who couldn't generate light patterns fast enough to ascend would be systematically drawn into the negative realm of the Shadows and forced to experience death. Compared to the joy, peace and eternal life from the universe of light, the conflict within the lower levels defied the basic rules of creation and turned into a big tragedy, causing lots of pain for everyone involved. The architects understood the disaster happened not only due to the failure of the younger beings to maintain awareness of the setting they were in, but also as a direct reaction from the infinite mind at its own inability to overcome the challenges it set for itself within the dense universe. The ultimate realization was that Shadows represented a paradox which came into existence the moment the younger beings gave up on themselves and forgot they were capable of fulfilling the hard requirements for ascension, since any difficulty could be overcome with willpower by drawing a proportional amount of energy from the infinite mind. The fascination with darkness happened as a sudden desire to release the tension the architects had put on the souls to evolve, and this reaction created a reversed impulse of will in the beings who felt abandoned, making them to want to hurt themselves instead of putting effort to ascend. The chaos continued, and it all came down to a choice of life or death for everybody involved. The fallen beings kept attacking the positive ones, and it was up to the individual to maintain sanity. At some point, the shadows even managed to pull an architect into the parallel dark realm, and from then on a full-scale war began, which further terrified creation. The hunger of the shadows was limitless, and once that architect fell, he started using all his knowledge to lead the never-before-seen rebellion against the eternal beings and against the very concept of returning to the universe of light. As soon as the next cycle of ascension came about, an evacuation plan was put into motion, and those who evolved correctly were taken out by the positive architects to safety. The final conclusion was that the experiment of the dense universe failed, and nothing more could be done for the fallen souls who didn't want to consciously help themselves. Deprived of an eternal source of light, the shadows absorbed all the energy possible from the lower levels until their dark reality collapsed under its own pressure, remaining only as a faded memory within the ever-learning infinite mind. Eventually the nightmare ended. In the wake of so much pain and suffering, the entire creation needed time to reflect on the tragedy that had happened within the old dense universe. While the shadows were no danger to the greater universe of light, their sudden manifestation let loose an unpredictable force strong enough to rival the divine impulse of creation. The angelic beings decided to never again put young souls in environments with such difficult conditions, since the accelerated evolution of a few was not worth the death of so many. Eons have passed, and the focus of creation turned towards developing new blueprints which use as motives of will simpler energetic boundaries, like the rapport between the masculine and feminine aspects of existence. This was exciting for a while and brought on a positive wave of amplification until the beings who originated the old dense universe felt there wasn't enough momentum gathered within the new universes for them to fully explore their potential. In order to continue their evolution, they needed to somehow reinvent the incredible speed of experience that was achieved under the pressure of the shadows. A great council of light was then called to decide whether or not it would be worth putting such an idea into action. While the danger was again to have a number of beings die, the promise of reaching the next level of experience was too enticing to be completely dismissed. To prevent the rising of the shadows, the proposal was to create a new mega-universe which would have enough safety mechanisms in place not to let things get out of control. The Great Council was forced into recognising how much the universe of light had developed solely due to the abilities of the group who had got out from the old dense universe, and they couldn't deny there was an overall yearning from everyone to push the boundaries of existence once more. The final decision was to go ahead and create the new mega-universe, since the Council felt this was the only way to balance the difference in speed of the angelic beings in the universe of light, and any unpredictability would have to be accepted as the risk of what it meant to exist. In terms of scale, the new structure was thousands of times bigger than the old universe, and it included tasks and responsibilities for beings of different ages and complexities to work together and unify their experience to reach an equalized state of consciousness within a stable, energetic blueprint. The architects, as the oldest and wisest beings in creation having the experience of directly fighting the shadows, foresaw that the younger beings would have trouble controlling the variables of experience, and the strain on consciousness would again raise monsters of darkness, and yet they agreed to support the decision because they understood the infinite mind needed to prove to itself it had the capacity to consciously evolve to the next level while holding the entire creation in its focus without destroying it.